trained in a whole different ton of martial arts, military trained as well, fluent in Russian and Ukrainian with a last name that's like it comes right out of a movie. You'd think that this man would have been hired by the CIA, perhaps some other agency, yet he got into tech. Daniil Saiko, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you, man. What an intro.
Yeah, I came up with that just now. But no one else is going to know this. We knew each other from way back as kids, technically. So it's real cool to bring you here today and talk a little bit about your journey through martial arts and combat sports, right? Training in the Army and how that's translated into your career in tech as it stands today, how it's helped you, what it's done. We can share that with the rest of the viewers watching, the whole three of them out there.
Happy to hear. Yeah, last time I saw you, I think it was 16 or maybe even 17 years ago.
Yeah, that we've seen each other in person, probably a couple calls here and there, catch up, whatever. But no, definitely since we were kids doing karate, literally, right? So on that note, let's maybe catch everyone else up on this. What combat sports or martial arts have you done to date?
So I started with judo when I was back in Ukraine. Training in Kiev. I actually had a funny judo schedule. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's what my special time was. I go to judo. And then Tuesday and Thursday, I was doing ballroom dancing. So very opposite training.
Just in case you got your ass kicked too much, they could stake you on the dance floor. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of funny training habits there. Very different, obviously. Then I moved to Canada, started training karate with you. I did that for 4 years. So judo for 4 years and karate for 4 years. Got my black belt there. Then in high school, I wrestled for 1 year. Then I had to pause, and then I wrestled again back in university at a much obviously serious level there for 2 years until I succumbed to too many injuries from training. After university, I've trained jiu-jitsu. It's kind of hard to count because of COVID, but about, I think, 7 years worth of jiu-jitsu.
Sure. Like you started at one point, a little bit off and on, you get back to it, right? Exactly. Your first class was at whatever point. Yeah, but I think most of us here who do it leisurely are in the same kind of boat, right?
Yeah.
First class you ever took, you're 16 and off and on as much as you can.
I was actually quite good on the first class, but then, then I took a break you had to move and for work, and then COVID happened. There's a couple of big breaks in there, but I think cumulative time was about 7 years.
And for wrestling, what weight did you wrestle at?
In high school, I was at 77 kilos. And then in university, I was kind of all over the place on the weight, but around like 90 kilo, that was my target area.
I think we talked about this before too, but I don't remember. Did you cut a lot of weight every time you had to wrestle, or no? Were you fighting at your natural weight?
You basically always have to cut, right? You always basically have to cut, and it's it's unfortunate because you see guys wearing with too much stuff and barely standing, but at the end of it, practice, and it's clearly unhealthy. I'm actually not extremely, but I don't think the wrestling is the healthiest option at all. There's so many injuries. It's such a tough thing on the body that I don't know if it's something that's long-term sustainable for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, there's career options for it. If you're going to go to the Olympics, you're going to go into pro wrestling, but nonetheless, it's I dislocated my shoulder, right?
And pro wrestling is the guys jumping off. That's actually pro wrestling.
Yeah, but they make money. Those guys, right? They all start at I guess the high school or university level, right? But that was one thing I always wish that I had the opportunity to do. I just never went to schools that had it, but I would have loved to actually wrestle when my body could recover as quickly as
it can. You can only take so many double legs and suplexes. So,
but your ears look good though, so you probably weren't shooting a lot, right?
No, I do different kind of attacks. I do mostly actually from judo. I do a lot of just.
And it wasn't freestyle wrestling, right?
It was
if I'm
freestyle.
Not mistaken. It was freestyle. You just didn't shoot.
I know how to shoot. That's not my preferred. I actually my go-tos are fireman, which is kind of off a shot, and head and arm throw.
And you got a lot of those.
Yeah. And you don't get a lot of damage to the ears from head and arm throw.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty good. And you still train today, right? In what exactly?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's your current, that's what you're sticking with for the time being, foreseeable future.
That's the plan. I would want to continue as long as I can. Hopefully I can do it when I'm super old and continue rolling with people.
Yeah. And gi, no gi.
I do both. I think you have to train both to be well-rounded, but I do prefer gi.
You prefer gi? A little lighter on the body, do you think, at all, or not really?
Lighter on the body, it's different kind of dynamic, I find. It's a bit slower pace. It's a lot more tactical. because there's a lot more grips. So I do think it's a bigger cognitive load, so to speak.
Some guys I've trained with who are a bit older, they say too, like, because some of the younger guys, they got all this energy, and like we said, like at 20 years old compared to 30, 40, 50, right? You can recover fast. So they don't care. They're going crazy on the mats when they're rolling. But the guys who are more experienced and better technique, they can use it to like slow them down a little bit so they don't get hurt.
Get a good grip in, and you lock it in. They're not moving anywhere.
Yeah, right.
I was rolling with that 8th degree black belt, and that man is, partially blind, broken, but he's been a black belt for 43 years, training for 60 or something like that. And, he's old and very broken person. I'm a pretty big dude. I felt like a baby in his arms.
Yeah.
His technique was so good. He was able to grab you in such ways. I'm like, wow, like I'm generally pretty strong person.
Yeah.
And I had no even chance of moving. So it kind of shows that those grips and the control can be so significant.
How much you weigh? Can I ask you that? How much?
I'm about 240, 250.
240, 250.
Depends on a week.
Yeah, we're in the same jacket, but you fill it out a little bit better than me, so.
Yeah, we didn't plan the outfits.
Yes, we did. Don't listen to him. How often you train now? Like, how many times a week?
I usually average about 3 to 4 times a week. Sometimes more.
That's really good.
Sometimes less. I also really try to do when I travel. I think it's an important part of me kind of around the work component. This year I've trained out of Miami, I trained in Warsaw, and I trained in Paris.
Nice.
On top of my normal gym. And I think it's been amazing experience going out and meeting other people in other gyms. And yeah, it's amazing start to the day. It's usually in like a morning class, 6 or 7 a.m. class.
Whatever you can do depending on the work schedule, right? Like you got to work.
A lot of people go to the gym when they fly and stuff like that. I just go to a different kind of gym.
Same. No, I love doing that too. It's also you just get a feel for, we were talking about this before, you get a feel for the abilities in different places. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not saying like I'm an expert by any means, but getting to go and roll with guys in a different country, different city, just see the caliber out there, right? And compare it to back home, you start to just, it's like ring IQ, I guess. Can you say that for jiu-jitsu, ring IQ, kind of?
In a way, because they're out trying to get you. So like every time I go out, it's almost like a mini competition because you're the new guy. And
everyone wants to show you like this is our town kind of thing in a nice way for the most part.
But it's usually, remember I was once training in Las Vegas. Like, you clearly, it's like a tournament. Everybody's out to get you. The coach is like, that guy.
I was going to say the coach is also like, go against this guy. Go against, you got one more round. You can do one more round. Go against him. Go against him.
My top purple belt. Whatever. And you're like,
it's pride for them too, right? If like, I think it's a bit complimentary though if they're doing that because they must see that, okay, this guy's pretty good, go against this guy, it's like, okay, I'm hoping that my guys can kind of put this guy in his place a bit respectfully, right? It's not a real competition, but it's cool to see that.
It's a good experience.
Yeah. No, I love that. I trained in Barcelona this year, Vancouver, and I mean, Waterloo is technically outside of my city, and I don't get to go out there all the time. And there's some really good guys out there. When I was in university, that's actually where I started regularly training jiu-jitsu right after we were done in Mississauga. So yeah, man, it's real cool. We'll start with your combat sport martial arts training. Where do you feel it's had the most impact on your career progression? Or perhaps before you even get there, maybe we quickly go into your actual day job. What are you doing day to day? Where are you at in technology? How'd you get there?
So I'm in product management.
Okay.
I got into it in an interesting way. So before I got a real job, I attempted a couple of startups. They didn't work out.
They're real jobs.
But I co-founded them. It was me and my buddy, a couple of buddies. We tried a couple of things.
Yeah, nothing more real than that. At the end of the day.
Yeah, it just it's a different kind of experience, especially if you're not joining a startup, you're starting up yourself. You're writing the code, you're thinking through ideas. So I did that for a number of years, for 2 or 3 years after university. I knew how to program a little bit back in from high school and university, but not significantly. But because it was my idea and I have a very high agency. I think I can do a lot and I can learn a lot. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to learn Python. So I started learning Python. I started learning SQL. And, very quickly I was able to.
It's just casually for fun. Make me feel really stupid.
Not casually, but, I was spending, 60, 80 hours a week doing it for months on time, right? We're like, well, I can stop hiring people. I can just save the money and do it myself. And initially I would hire people, but then very quickly, I can just learn that thing. And then so I ended up learning Python, JavaScript, and SQL quite well. And I was able to cobble together. I'm not good at writing code. Like I should not be writing serious code, but I'm very good at prototyping. I can get something out very quickly. It's hodgepodge. But it will work, right? That's the thing. And for POC, especially if we're being in product,
Yeah,
I think
you
that's
got to
very
sell something, right?
is like, will this concept work, right? Optimizing, that's a whole different story. Making it production grade, that's an even bigger story. But make sure something works, right? So I did that for a few years. Didn't work out. Had to get a real job, and at the same time, I did a finance degree. I was getting my CFA at the time, so I kind of found myself in a unique position. I knew I was pretty technical on the technology front, and I was pretty technical on the finance front, being like doing the CFA charter. It's you learn a lot of very in-depth things about a variety of different financial products. So I ended up finding myself in a foreign exchange company, and they were just starting up their technology, say not function, but kind of selling technology products to customers. So I joined in a unique place where they were just rolling out their API product for foreign exchange, and I joined as a pre-sale. So I can talk about APIs, and I can talk about the
Perfect guy.
Can talk about the foreign exchange a little bit, right? There's obviously better people at both. There's traders who do FX, and there's engineers, but talking about both to customers, and it was a really cool job going out. With customers or like who are downstream customers or like cruise ships. You're creating these payment systems for very bad internet, essentially environments where very poor network, where most of your API calls will fail. So how do you make a payment in like where you have a failure rate of over 50%, right? Making sure the payment goes through. Worked with a lot of different companies, with payroll, with banks, with all over the place. And then kind of over time, that pre-sales role, as I grew in the role, I ended up kind of caring about, I guess, API. It was like nobody cared about it a lot, and I was like, okay, this is important to me. So I kind of grew into product management very quickly. But my title and my official role was pre-sales for a very long time. And then once I got promoted to director of product, I finally got the product title. But I was like a kind of product manager and a pre-sales leader for a while already. It just kind of very grew organically because it was something I really was passionate about. I really cared about that product, and I was just taking on responsibility, whatever I could, try to support that product.
And it translates well, like the pre-sale skills that you get in that seat now going into the product side. It's a lot of transferable skills.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important skills for product management is talking to customers. And in pre-sales, that's all you do, right? So I think it was for that role, for me, it was very complimentary because I almost didn't have to do research because that's all I was doing, or my team was doing at the time. I would go out and I'd be talking and listening and all this, we want to do this, we want it differently. You're getting the feedback, you're taking it back. So I think pre-sales is incredible skill set for because there are some direct to product companies that do it, associate product manager roles, but usually you start somewhere else. You do customer support, you do sales, you do engineering, and you find yourself in product. I think pre-sales gives you that very good rounded set of skills where you know the product, you can demo it, you know the value proposition. At the same time, you've talked to the customers, and I think you're very well rounded. So obviously biased because I came from there, but in my current company where I'm director of product and I lead banking, API product, as well as marketplace product, some of the really good people I really enjoy working with are a lot of the pre-sales leaders and just pre-sales guys because
you get on with them.
It's not even get on with them. Obviously, I like pre-sales because I came from there a little bit, but it's also they just understand a much bigger scope about the technical components of the product, the functional components of the product, and how to position it, how to now we got to sell it to the customer or present the value, right? So I think, I think it's a very good set of skills for people.
You got a marketable story, and you market your story pretty well. I give you that. Where is your training? But we wouldn't have to say that. But where is your training impacted your career progression? Would you say the most? So let's start with your combat sport, martial arts training.
So I think the biggest impact it had, and it's kind of hard to point a single story. I think it's a continuum of things, but I think it's really interpersonal skills. And it sounds weird because combat sports are very individual, right? It's as much as you're on a team, but realistically, it's not like you're not on a football team, right? It's you against the other guy, right? And your coach in the corner. So I think what it's really good at is your interpersonal skills, because it really makes you focus on first yourself. it's a scary thing. Like I've competed in other sports. I've competed in swimming. You lose in swimming, so what? You're off by half a second, 2 second, whatever, right?
Definitely doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. I've been hit by my coach in swimming, but that was for different reasons. My turns weren't good, but and when you compete in jiu-jitsu or wrestling, you go out and that guy on the other side, you might know him, you might be buddies, you might do whatever, right? But once you start to match, he's out to get you. It's the amount of adrenaline you get. So, and especially if you've done enough competitions, it's a scary thing. Like I've got hurt in my last competition a little bit, right? In front of my wife, actually. And she's like, oh my God. And it's fine. It's not a big deal, but still like you're going out and but that emotional toll and that, not even a toll, but that you have to go through that complex set of emotions for competition. Even before competition, you do that in the class, right? Just to go through the door. And there's somebody basically attacking you, trying to choke you, trying to throw you. It's a scary thing. You could be a big, tough guy, but you're going to get tossed. You will be choked, right? Maybe somebody have never had any of those experiences. Maybe people had trauma. So, it's very different experience for everybody. But I think that just internalizing all the different emotions your body is going through purely because of physiology. Your heart rate goes up, your adrenaline pumps. It's a crazy experience. And then on the other side, once you're kind of, okay, fine, I'm not scared of being choked. I'm not scared of being attacked, right? You start to, on the other side of interpersonal, like I'm a bigger guy and I've done this for a while. And you might be rolling with somebody who's brand new, somebody, you don't know their story, right? And I can easily drop the weight, but I actually have to make sure I don't drop the weight on them. I make sure I don't hurt them as much as I can, right? And it's sometimes it's hard, but you have to be conscious about who you're rolling with. And it's not just the size, because just because you're half your size doesn't mean that they're not really good. They might be a black belt in judo and they can toss you, all day long, right? You have to be emotionally cognizant of who is the other person. Maybe they're having a bad day and that's why they're spazzy. Maybe whatever, right? So it's the same time you're training, but they're your training partner, and you have to match the energy. And frankly, sometimes you have to do some things. There's somebody comes in. I'm not sure if you had these experiences, but maybe somebody was drinking or somebody came in and they're hurting other people. I've seen a number of those cases in different gyms, and they have to be, not put their place, but in a way you have to look, hey, I'm gonna go with that person now. You kind of been hurting those people. How about you go against me?
That does happen. That does happen for sure, man.
Actually, I remember the gentleman who was supposed to join us on this podcast. I remember him doing one of those things to a brown belt when we were training together.
Really?
Somebody hurt one of the girls, and because the gentleman thought he was a big tough guy, and I actually remember that lesson from him. He's like, "Next match, you're against me," and it did not end up well for that gentleman.
Well, even back then, eh? Yeah, and I'm picking up what you're putting down, but you think it's you get a different level of emotional intelligence, even just recreationally training on the mat. Do you think there's a difference between those, or the experience or what you take from it is different from people who train recreationally as opposed to competitively? And what's that contrast?
I think there probably is, but it's like an 80-20 rule. I'm sure once you do it every day, twice a day, it's, you get more out of it. But if I think people who are maybe more timid, more shy, will get a lot out of it, because I see this transformation in people. I've been training for many people for many years. You see people coming in, they've never done a combat sport, and they're doing it for self-defense, for health reason, and you can see them grow into a different person within a couple of years. That it increases their confidence. And on the other side, it usually tends to be bigger guys who think they're tough. They actually calm down a bit because they realize, hey, I don't need to be spazzy. I don't need to be attacking. It kind of balances people out, and it mellows. I think it gets people more confident who need to be, and it gets the other side more confident themselves, so it actually causes them to chill. So I think it increases confidence in people. And depending on where you are on kind of the spectrum, it helps you in a different way.
So I think you're alluding to like a level of self-awareness as well, which in the workplace, tech for sure, right? Because I mean, we've all been on calls where, there's tons of egos in tech, right? Like that's just like a fact. There's tons of those, and there are some people who speak like they're God's gift to the world. You know what I mean? And you might be sitting there thinking like, does this person even sort of hear themselves? That's just like one case example. But I think if you're saying there's a different level of self-awareness you get by training in combat sports or martial arts, I think that's something that could directly impact your ability to progress through an organization, right? Perhaps like you have, because you not only understand maybe the position the other person's in or what they might be feeling, and you're trying to account for that, but you're also checking yourself the whole way through as to how am I coming across, how am I sounding, and that goes a lot longer of a way than probably a lot of people think, especially for those who aren't self-aware. Right?
Exactly. I think it helps you with emotional intelligence in a way. First, it starts by like looking inwards. And once you've kind of not mastered yourself, but you got yourself comfortable, because you go through very complex emotions yourself. You have to deal with fear, a lot of ego. You deal with a lot of complex things. And once you're on the other side of that, you start to really apply to other people. So in a weird way, I do think combat sports really help. If you've trained long enough, it really helps with your emotional intelligence, which obviously translate to workplace, dealing with your colleagues, with your boss, with clients. It just overall helps you navigate, especially if you're working in international assignments or with different cultures. I mean, people are different, and you being able to adjust with what people are saying and how they're treating you and themselves sometimes, I think it really helps with that.
What about your military training? Same question, but just instead of respect to combat sports, let's talk what you went through in the military. How has that impacted your career progression?
I think military, I've learned a lot, and I attribute a lot to my military career.
You're a corporal,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Infantry?
Yes, infantry, but I had a bit of a unique assignment in the infantry. I was in the reconnaissance, so it's almost very much opposite of what traditional infantry is perceived at to be, and kind of what it does, because when you're reconnaissance, you operate in small man teams, and you're completely unsupervised. You're just given a task and like, we'll see you in a few days. Do whatever you need to do. So there's a very, if you're infantry, everything is very regulated. There's a lot of rules. You have to,
It's what people think when they think military.
Exactly,
I guess, right?
Recon is exactly opposite of that. It's like, okay, well, just check in every 12 hours so you're alive and don't miss the check-in. And it's usually a code word, and that's it.
So you were deployed?
I never deployed. I did a lot of training in Canada. I went to like Nunavut. I've been all over Canada, but I've never deployed outside of Canada.
Oh. And so it's with respect to that then, I mean, not like we said, perhaps not what people, like civilians, when I say people, right, would think when they think military, right, when someone goes through military training, perhaps a bit of a different experience between recon and traditional infantry, I guess. But what did you take from that, and how do you think that's kind of helped you progress to where you are today, if at all?
I think one of the most applicable things, and I think a lot of people can apply this, and I've been trying to coach some of my team members on this. One important skill is there is something that was called commander's intent.
What's that? And
essentially what you're trained, especially in recon, and not even before recon, it was in airborne operations. They're just done differently than normal infantry operations because of potentially high casualty rate. You're trained to think of understanding what your boss needs to do and his boss's intention. And what that creates is that you're not trying to go out and do your boss's job. You just need to understand when he's telling you to do something, like why. You're kind of getting the bigger picture, and then you need to understand your boss's boss, because in the military there's potentially casualty, and your boss might. So you need to really be dynamic about kind of leadership a bit there. So what that is very applicable to the corporate world is, and this applies to everybody. You can be an analyst, you can be a manager, you can be a director. It's like, what is my boss's boss is trying to achieve with this, right? You're given a task. Well, why? What is the bigger picture? And you're not trying to do something different. You're still trying to do what you're being assigned to do, let's say a project or a task or whatever. But you're really trying to understand and cover it off. Maybe you're given instructions, and those instructions missed a key step because you just know, because your day-to-day, good example on my team would be somebody specializes in maybe security, maybe they're specializing in specific technology, right? I'm not a deep down expert. I want them to understand my scope and what we're trying to accomplish commercially, and then on the product side. But hopefully I give them enough context that person understands maybe, hey, they see something else that's applicable, that has a second order effect, right? So instead of just telling people you have to do X, Y, and Z, I hope that they're able to think about, well, what about A and B and C? They're actually related to X, Y, and Z, right? And that's kind of what commander's intent is trying to understand the bigger picture, and then thinking, what I'm doing, is this going to really accomplish that?
Okay, so that's a bit of a curveball for me because but it's good because the next question I was asking was a bit assumptive on my part because again, civilian, never trained in the military, right? My perception, maybe it's because I've seen too many movies or maybe it's just what I think, right? It's when you're told to do something, you do it, you don't ask questions and you execute, right? And that's what I think a lot of people, perhaps, I don't have data to back that up, but that's what I would think would expect from someone who has had their military training.
So
right?
I can tell you a really good. It's not a movie; it's a series. Band of Brothers. There are actually
Yeah, yeah.
famous scene there when the orders are given by the general to
Mhm.
everybody, and usually general goes to the colonel, colonel goes to the major, major exactly what you think. But in airborne operations, kind of similar at a much bigger scale, and then recon, everybody's there for the general because you don't know who's going to land on the ground. Your captain, you're a
Fair.
captain, everyone might be dead, so you have to know the general plan. So literally,
Right.
the general was presenting the whole battle plan. So even the privates were in the room. Everybody knew. They knew the commander's intent, and that was a D-Day operation. That's a massive, massive airborne operation, right? So that's kind of the example of. There's a famous scene where they're doing that, in a number of other movies they cover that. But I think it's a very important skill that you can even
Incredibly.
as an intern you can do it.
Oh man, like that for when you talk about emotional intelligence, right? Being able to even just start because some managers, if they're a good manager, they're going to think like that in my opinion, because they're going to make sure that their team understands the scope. You understand why we're doing what we're doing. You're going to understand, even though it's perhaps above your pay grade to know, but it's good for you to understand the scope of what's happening. Why do I need this information from you? What does that mean for my bosses, right? When someone is new, you can explain that. As an intern or even anyone joining a new job, their manager may not be that good, right? Where they're thinking the other side of it, where they're just saying, "I'm telling you to do something, go ahead and do it." But if I think someone looks at their managers that way, where they actually actively try and understand, they may be able to sort of break that barrier, right, and open the door where maybe that manager actually is a bit more forthcoming. I would imagine. Have you had that experience?
Exactly, right. It's if you have a great manager, and they'll do it for you. But it's kind of be taking a bit of more positive control of the situation, right? Tell me
You can
more.
make it happen.
You can make it happen, right? And you make your manager's life easier that way. There's a bit of a dark side to it, where I've seen in some cases where people, are trying to overdo it in a way like, oh, I know what they're trying to do, so I'm going to do something else instead.
Okay.
You still have to do what you're being asked to do, right? I think that's the key component. And you just try to enhance it. Don't try to, if I tell you to do A and you come in and do B, well, maybe I have a reason I ask you, and you say B is better, but like, no, maybe there is a specific reason, a technical, regulatory, legal, whatever reason, right? There's a very specific reason I ask you to do it, but you might do A, and then you say, hey, I can also do B, or I've done a partially B as a POC, just to show you, right? So I think it's key, like, do what you're asked to do, and then just show that, like, on the other side of it, I understood the assignment, and this is a way how you can enhance it.
But tactfully in a way where you've done some thinking where this is how it's going to be best received by my boss. So that's probably where the discipline comes in too, because no doubt I'm sure you've taken a little bit of discipline from the military,
I hope
right?
so.
A little bit, yeah, perhaps a little bit. Being disciplined in that, okay, you're going to do what you're told to do, but you're just thinking ahead and not doing it blindly.
Yep.
I would say, right? So between martial arts training, between military training, looking at both of those in contrast, are there similarities? Are there differences in what you've taken from each of them and applied to your work life?
I do think they're a bit different. I think martial arts is a very individual journey, whereas when we talked about really emotional intelligence, where military is more of a social thing. So I picked up a lot of my social components from that. So I do think they're different. I think they're complementary in a sense. They're both, I don't want to say aggressive, but in a way they are. Right? I would say that's a unifying factor. That in both cases there's somebody on the other side you're trained against that they want to hurt you, right? So I think that was the common factor that I think drove a lot of kind of behavior and some of the patterns. But I do think they were definitely complementary.
Now, again, this could be, you could have already answered this in a given way, but I do want to go back to it because every martial arts gym, we'll say, right, or they're run a little bit differently. They could be, right. Some of them are a bit more like, we can say, culty or cliquey than others in some fashion, right?
Mhm.
Are there cases you think where perhaps what people take away from their experience, whether it be in the military directly, whether it be martial arts or a combination of both, that perhaps there's a negative to what they take into their career. And an example of this would be someone becoming too much of a yes man, where they're used to perhaps obeying, right? Or just following blindly. Maybe not in the military, but I've seen some gyms where the coach says this and with things outside of training, right? And the person just asks how high without asking any questions, right? So like that kind of obedience, does that turn you into too much of a yes man in the office, where when you have a boss who maybe does want to take a little bit of advantage, right, of you, you don't really realize that. You don't know how to tactfully push back. And now you're in a position where maybe you're burning out, as an example. Or perhaps someone who's thinking they come from that world where, it's continuous improvement and all of that, where they're striving too much for perfection. You got to get out of POC, and this person's trying to do every little detail, like in the Blackberry movie. I don't know if you saw that. He's trying to get everything perfect before he kicks it out, before he sends out the prototype. Sometimes things are time sensitive. Nothing's going to be perfect. Is this a factor at all, or am I just kind of crazy in my head?
So I think in martial arts, I haven't seen really a downside, to be honest. I think it's generally positive. If anything, it's going to increase your confidence, and that confidence is going to let you tactfully say no to things, right? I think in the military, and I'm part of a couple of veterans groups. I'm heavily involved with some of the topics, and it's. I think there are some downsides there where some people can be very institutionalized.
That's the word.
They really, think in certain ways, and especially if they've done it their whole career, they might come out and they have a hard time thinking beyond their role, right? I carried a gun, I need to be carrying a gun, so I can only be a policeman, right? Or a fireman. That's kind of the two very common reactions for people, right? And it's fine. There's a lot of similar types of people, but there's other roles you can do, right? I know one of the captains I know, he's a behavioral scientist now, right? I know guys, one of the guys at recon school with, he's interior designer.
Come on.
Yeah. I tried to call him up to design my new house, but he hasn't responded to me. But, I think
I know one if you need one.
maybe. But there's guys, who go out and explore things. But there's a lot of guys, especially who've done it. They started young, and that's the only thing they know. They kind of have a hard time leaving that.
Okay.
And that's what a lot of veterans groups help with that. Like, for example, I'm part of Treble Victor Group, which is a veterans network on Bay Street. And, they try to help people to show how you apply those skill sets, project management, leadership, whatever, to other
sales. No,
exactly, sales.
Dude, I would love to get involved in that and help with that if I could. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I love that.
Yeah. So there are groups and people who do realize this. I'm just repeating some of the stuff that those groups kind of communicate. But I've definitely seen talking to people where they're like, you can do more than just that. That's great, but it's not just carrying a gun and yelling at people, right?
Okay, very interesting. Does getting humbled on the mat, right, when you're sparring, when you're training, do you feel it makes you a better manager?
Yeah, I think going back to the emotional intelligence, right, like losing and facing that adversity is important for anybody, not just a manager. I think as a father and a husband, that's important. But as a manager overall, I think it's important, right? If you always win, there's something, you're not training hard enough. You're not training in the right place, I think. So you do need to be humbled. You do, and it does help because it's, I think, a healthy part, especially in product. If you're always right, you're not taking big enough risk, right? You need to be doing something different. So I think it's important for product. I could definitely see relevance. Like, you need to be, creating a hypothesis, it fails, try something different, right? It's kind of very similar that way, right? In jiu-jitsu, you lay a trap that fails, you lay a trap that fails, but the third thing works, right? And that third thing is like amazing, right? Maybe you have to do 5 steps, right? Kind of the same thing. As long as you're progressing and you're, if you think about it in jiu-jitsu terms, as long as you're improving your position, and you could be starting in a fifth, like a equal position, but as long as your every attempt gets you closer to a really good position, that's all that matters. So I think the same thing, right?
Do you see a difference in approach between, so if you work at all or have clients at all, or just in your experience at work, you've interacted with people, other managers, for example, that do train and those who do not, and do you see a difference in their manner and how they approach different problems, how they manage people? With that respect, where you can tell that this person has been humbled and this person, like, they're a god at work and that's what's always in their mind. You know what I mean? that's where their head is, and you can feel that from them.
It's hard for me to say definitively because I don't think I know enough people. I think I definitely get along with the people who do train. I was at a conference recently speaking, and my co-speaker from Bank of America used to wrestle, right? And we get along very well.
Yeah.
I found out one of our heads of sales. He's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and I get along with those people. So maybe
Did you ever go with him? Like
we planned a couple of times, but we just never ended up doing it because of
he's running
flights.
from you.
No, it's just the flights, just the flights didn't work out. But, I think the people I do know, I do get along with, but I don't think it's a big enough sample set for me to definitely say.
That's fair.
It may be just something, it's a weird hobby we're both into, who knows?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I've seen some, from like some very, very senior people who are in positions where I've seen other people in those same positions have like incredibly large egos. Even with me earlier in my career, be very... I got to say patient, where typically like when I started and making all these calls, talking to people, and you call someone at that senior level and you're still like a young guy, right? So if you say the wrong thing or you approach the wrong way, it might chew your ear off, right? But there are some definitely people who were put in positions where they could have did that to me, and they didn't. I found out later, it's like, oh, this guy's a black belt in judo. Oh, this guy's been training jiu-jitsu for forever. So I don't know if that's a direct correlation, but I would agree with you that I think getting humbled on the mat, or at least in another part of your life, it does make you, you're checked. That's the only word that I can use, right? You're checked in other areas of your life because you're constantly losing somewhere, even when you're doing well somewhere else.
Yeah, but you're also learning from it, right? If you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu,
in a good way, you got to lose, right?
If you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, I have so much respect because you've committed your life to it's a lot of hours, right? A lot of other, I have a black belt in karate, and that was 4 years, right?
Right.
I'm 7 years into jiu-jitsu. I'm a purple belt, right? I'm still a few years away from a black belt, right? And it's gonna take a lot of work, right? So it's a very hard belt to get. It's a huge achievement. And I think anybody who's achieved it is like, it's just overall the grit and the patience, because it's not like you're going out and you're going to have some rough days. You're going to get hurt, and somebody's knee will slip and you get hit in the head. You're going to suffer a little bit. And that's a lot of suffering over 9-10 years, right? So I have respect. It means if they're applying the same grit and the same patience to their other aspects of life, I think, they would be successful there too.
Mm-hmm. And last question, when you're hiring other people, we talked about some of the qualities that you've been able to gather in parts of your life and apply them to work. Which one of those qualities is the most important? What do you really look for when it comes to hiring in that respect?
So I really look for their attitude and kind of those soft skills, but really the attitude, because, I guess if I was maybe hiring for somebody in deep security or something very specific, the skill set might be really important, right? But generally, as long as you're in the general vicinity of the skills, I think if you have the right attitude, I can coach you to there, right?
Yeah.
But attitude, I cannot coach.
No doubt.
So I think I really look for the attitude.
I don't want to either.
It's very hard. It's doable, but it's so hard to do, right? To motivate and change a person's motivations there. So I really look for the attitude and their kind of the soft skills and their willingness to do things. So ideally, it's a high agency person that's willing to go out and do things, right? And then if you're that kind of person, listen, I can put a training program for you, no problem, and we can get you where you need to be. Assuming you have some foundation, right? You still need to have general foundation, but I can get you to the next level.
Yeah. That's like the best foundation, right? Like the attitude, the initiative, like these are key things that, like you said, you could teach, but you probably don't want to teach. That stuff they got to come stock with. The rest of it can be learned, right?
Exactly.
Bravo. Okay. Well, hey, man, it's nice catching up with you after all these years. Your gym now, do you want to say which one that is?
Yeah, I'm in Gracie, Baja, Toronto. So it's on major intersection of King and Bathurst. So anybody's listening, wants to come and train in mornings, evenings. They have a lunch class.
We got open mat?
I don't know if we have an open mat. It's I guess it's a Sunday. More of a Sunday thing, but everybody's welcome. And yeah, it's a great school. Shout out to all my training partners, all the coaches, professors. It's a great place to train.
All right, maybe I'll swing by for an open mat if you're up for it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Bravo.